speaking of World War II, the pinnacle of the hotel was after World War II, when the nation began to thrive. America was back on its feet, a world economic power. There was prosperity, and in the life of Jewish Americans, the prosperity was being able to go up to the Catskill Mountains, but not just to the Catskills, but if you were affluent enough, if you were successful enough, you'd go to Grossinger's. And that was a marked distinction.
Yes, and it really was. And of course, you know, the fact that Barney Ross trained there, and the journalists all came up and covered the fight camp. And for those who don't know, Barney Ross was a boxer, and he was Jewish. He lived in Chicago, and he wanted to come east. He didn't want to train in the Stillman's gym kind of thing. He wanted kosher food, and he was observant. And so Milton Blackstone heard about it, and he made the marriage between Grossinger's and Barney Ross. And of course, when the journalists came up, they followed the fight camp, and then they came up to the hotel, and they started, and they met this nice little blonde lady. And they all fell in love with my mother. And when they went back to the city to write their columns, they wrote about her. And the people in New York who read the columns said, we got to see what this is all about.
That's great. So it starts with Barney Ross. By the time I got there, which would have been 1953 or so, Rocky Marciano was world champion, heavyweight champion. And we would see Rocky around the place, and it was known and celebrated everywhere that Rocky Marciano trained at Grossinger's. So the staff would get to see him, he'd hang out, he'd be around the lake. I think I have a picture of Rocky and I, you know, doing this next to each other, and he would
was very
around.
gracious when it came to taking photos.
Yes.
And
Yes.
we loved him. I mean, he was like part of the family. I know his wife and little girl came up for a while. So it's, and the boxers really played a role in the development of Grossinger's. But what really, I think, developed it was the fact that the people who worked with us, not for us, got the same feeling that the family had. I think we imparted it to them. And it was the kind of thing that we never felt that there was anything that we would do. We would not ask anybody to do something that we wouldn't do ourselves. Unless, of course, it was something that we were unable. I mean, if they asked me to stoke the furnace, I couldn't do that because I wouldn't know how. But I'm talking about, you know, normal things.
Sure, that was imparted to us. That's something that I felt very keenly as a staff member. I mean, saying, well, we're part of a family, that word has become a little bit trite. But when it was used at Grossinger's, it was true. And we did sense that we were part of a family. Not only that that word was spoken and people would say it, but in actual day-to-day life. The quarters that the staff were given at Grossinger's were better than almost any other hotel. And among college students and people that worked at hotels in the Catskills in the summer, it was known that the staff had better quarters at Grossinger's than anywhere else because of the decency of the family and the way the family treated everyone. It was generally known also that we made more money, in part because the guests were more affluent and more generous and better tippers. And they knew that the most generous people were at Grossinger's, which is very good, by the way, for the bellhops.